The Adirondack wilderness was never meant for the faint of heart. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, it was a place of rugged survival, where a man's only allies were his rifle, his wits, and the endless stretch of forest that swallowed him whole. And no man embraced that life more fully than French Louie Seymour, a hermit trapper and folk legend who made the mountains his home. Born around 1832 in Quebec, Canada, Louis grew up in the harsh northern wilderness, learning the ways of hunting and trapping at an early age. By the time he reached adulthood, civilization had little appeal for him. He drifted south into the wilds of New York, drawn by the vast, unspoiled Adirondacks, where a man could live off the land and answer to no one. For over 50 years, Louis roamed the vast West Canada Lakes region, moving from one rough-built cabin to another, his entire world contained within the lakes, rivers, and pine forests that stretched endlessly around him. He was a small man, barely over 5 feet tall, but tough as iron, with wiry strength and a face weathered by decades of exposure to wind, snow, and sun. His long, tangled beard, thick French-Canadian accent, and ragged clothing made him an almost mythical figure to those who crossed his path. Despite his reclusive nature, Louis was known to trappers, loggers, and guides throughout the region. He was often seen in Speculator, Paseco, and Wells, emerging from the woods every spring and fall to trade his furs for supplies. Flour, coffee, tobacco, whiskey, and gunpowder. He had little use for money, as the forest provided all he truly needed. Yet for all his isolation, Louis was no stranger to adventure, danger, and even the occasional act of heroism. One winter, as the snow piled deep and the rivers froze solid, Louis found himself caught in an unexpected blizzard near Spruce Lake. The storm had come fast, turning the air into a wall of white, and he was miles from his cabin. With the temperature dropping to well below zero, he knew he wouldn't survive the night without shelter. Fighting against the howling wind, he spotted a massive fallen spruce, its uprooted base forming a small hollow beneath it. Clawing away the snow, he crawled inside, pulling his heavy coat around him. Throughout the night, he fed his small fire with twigs and pine cones, careful to ration his matches. He chewed on a frozen piece of venison, the cold biting through his skin even in the confined space. Outside, the wind screamed through the trees like a living thing, but Louis didn't panic. He had faced worse. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world buried under 4 feet of snow. Louis dug himself free, shook the frost from his beard, and, without a word of complaint, walked 15 miles back to his cabin, as if the night had been nothing more than a passing inconvenience. Not all of Louis's encounters with nature were so easily dismissed. One autumn, after weeks of trapping along the West Canada Creek, he returned to one of his remote cabins to find the door ripped off its hinges. Inside, the place was in shambles, his bunk smashed, his food stores torn apart, claw marks gouged deep into the logs. A black bear had decided to move in. Undeterred, Louis set his pack down, checked his old muzzleloader, and calmly rebuilt his door. That night, as he cooked a pan of pancakes over the fire, he heard the heavy snuffling and huffing of the bear just outside. It wanted back in. Louis, never one to waste a shot, waited. The bear, now emboldened, shoved its massive head through the doorway, its dark eyes locked onto the source of the scent. Without hesitation, Louis swung his old trapping axe, cracking the bear across the snout. The beast roared, rearing back in surprise, then turned and bolted into the woods. Louis, unfazed, simply sat back down and finished his pancakes. For all his wild reputation, Louis had a kindness to him that few knew about. He was known to help lost travelers, guiding them back to safety when they wandered too deep into the woods. One autumn, a pair of city men, novice hunters from Albany, became hopelessly lost near Pillsbury Mountain. They had followed a deer too far off the trail, and as the sun dipped behind the peaks, they realized they were miles from camp with no idea which direction to go. By sheer luck, they stumbled upon a thin trail of smoke rising from the trees. Following it, they found Louis sitting outside his cabin, puffing on his pipe. He took one look at them, shivering, hungry, and wide-eyed with fear, and without a word, gestured for them to sit by his fire. He fed them venison and black coffee, listened to their story, then simply said, "You follow me." For the next several miles, Louie led them through the twisting, unmarked trails with the ease of a man walking his own backyard. By dawn, they were back at their camp. When they turned to thank him, Louie was already gone, disappearing into the trees like a ghost. French Louie lived in the Adirondacks until around 1915, when age finally caught up with him. He died alone, as he had lived, in one of his cabins, leaving behind no family, no possessions, only the stories told by those who had met him. Today, the French Louie Trail winding through the West Canada Lakes region bears his name. The forests he called home still stand, the lakes still mirror the sky, and on cold, quiet nights, when the wind howls through the trees, some say you can still hear the faint crunch of snow under old snowshoes, as if the ghost of French Louie is still out there, wandering the mountains, forever a part of the wilderness he loved. We hope you enjoyed this non-fiction story about French Louie. Please give it a like and hit subscribe.